Finding the Golden Thread, a surrealistic autobiography. A nightmare. I wanted to strip the figure from activity, gesture, apparatus, or setting that would attach it to society. That was how I learned the first of 3 important lessons during my adolescence. I discovered first that I am congenitally alienated. This initial lesson I learned from painful experience one day when I was 12. So I called my parents to the dining room table to view a new drawing. My elaborate portrayal of a lone, tiny figure floating naked and hairless on a black background dotted with stars. It must have been shortly after I learned about molecules. I haven't believed that anything is solid or stable since I learned the universe is made up of particles that are inextricably connected by invisible threads. In fact, I believed that form and space were manufactured by our own imaginations. Nothing we thought we saw was real. My father's large eyes narrowed to slits when he saw my drawing. My mother's delicate, nearly invisible eyebrows arched and her lips puckered. They looked at each other, then back at the drawing. "Who's that supposed to be?" my father said, tapping the figure with his index finger. "Me! That's me in the universe!" My father's bushy eyebrows slid together, wrinkling his face into a frown. I was puzzled by his response. I was not used to receiving a lot of criticism from my parents, but rather critical acclaim from my parents. It was particularly important to me that my father think I was bright. My mother called my father Brilliantine and me Brilliantina. But I guess I should have been grateful that my father didn't mix science and religion. Because my mother's next comment about the drawing was, "Where's God?" "Where's God?" my mother wanted to know. At this point, my disappointment oozed ominously toward the feeling that I was about to get into trouble. But I was quick on my feet, even in those days. "Oh, he's there," I said. I wasn't sure where, since this was right around the time that I was graduating from thinking God was an old white man with a beard to wondering whether he was really there, whether it was a drawing or whether it was anywhere. "You look all alone." "Why do you make yourself all alone?" Uninformed, unprepared, I said, It's just a thought. You know, sort of throwaway. It's just a thought. That probably meant symbolic, which they knew, but I didn't. So now my mother looked hurt. And the next thing she said was, "Honey, don't you feel loved enough?" Love? Love? I thought, what did love have to do with my place in the universe? And I asserted myself, and I said, it's a lie to always draw smiling faces. My mother looked like she was about to cry. My father recoiled. I also was surprised to hear such an adult opinion coming out of my head. But now I was sweating. And my face felt like it was on fire. Probably about as red as this shirt. That used to happen to me a lot at that age. My father grinned. That scornful grin that he usually reserved for other adults. In fact, I had never seen that scornful grin coming in my direction. And he said, "Cynic." Cynic? Well, I must have guessed that a cynic was a person who had no faith in the world. Not God, not the universe, not her mother, not her father, nothing. It hurt my feelings. For the first time, I had to search myself for faith, and finding none, I got depressed. And I went upstairs to lay on my bed with a headache that got worse while I tried and repeatedly tried to visualize God as the invisible thread that holds all the molecules together. Adolescents have amazing recuperative powers and metamorph on an almost continual basis. And I soon bounced out of my depression a little closer to atheism. Yeah. I just didn't understand why it was desirable or necessary or inevitable to have faith in the world. Why? Because it seemed to me that molecules kept holding together whether anybody had faith or didn't have faith. That's the nature of congenital alienation. So, why wouldn't I want to create images that are detached from society? Well, I would want to create images that represented the isolated microcosmic accidents which I believed was human experience. So I did just that. I made an endless series of anonymous faces, floating, existing without environment, floating on the page like paramecia in fluid. I refused, even for the sake of better composition, to sit one single figure in a chair by the window. Brilliantine taught me the second lesson of my adolescence himself, that there is a difference between terrible about myself because of something I had done wrong and feeling terrible about myself because of what I thought or felt. My favorite adults, like my father, could even inspire me towards migraine, which is exactly what happened to me in the middle of a Sunday morning cinnamon roll when I was 14. All six of us, my parents, my brother, my sister, and my littlest brother, sat cozily on pink plush furniture in the sunlit corner of the living room. All of us tried not to drop crumbs on the oversized illustrated Bible spread across our laps. A few minutes of munching after my father finished the prayer of thanks for the cinnamon rolls, that we were together, that we were alive and healthy, all of those things. I exclaimed to my parents, I don't even understand why people need to believe in God. People who? My father said. My mother wrapped her cinnamon roll in a napkin and started praying. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Anybody, I said. My father's eyes widened as if he just discovered something. And he bowed his head, not closed eyes to pray, but frowning to think. He thought for a long time. My little brothers and sisters crowded together on the sofa like piglets, trying to get comfortable, trying not to be there really, afraid to make a sound. My mother still mumbled prayers. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Father looked up and said, well, I guess you're old enough now to decide whether you believe or don't believe. But girl, in some cold, hard time in your life, there's going to be a moment when you wish you could remember how to pray. I felt strange, as if I'd been freed of one burden and taken hostage by another. The third lesson I learned during my adolescence was that I was doomed to feeling uncomfortable with myself. This lesson I learned from my mother. Every Sunday morning when I declined to eat my cinnamon roll over the oversized Bibles in the living room, she would sigh. Well, if you don't want to be with us, you ought to be using this time for your own reflection. You don't have to tell anybody else what you think, but you need to meditate. So why was I doomed? Because I knew she really did want to know what was on my mind, and that if I told her, she would get upset because my thoughts were not pretty. I was an adolescent. Adolescents do not have pretty minds. I knew that. I knew that while it was happening. How could she not have known that? And if I didn't tell her or anybody else my thoughts, or worse, told anyone that I had thoughts that I didn't have, I would be a sneak, a liar, and a cheat. So any way you looked at it, I was roadkill on the patent leather slippers of my own guilt.